everyone. Welcome to the 5G Future Summit. Thanks for sticking it out to the end of the day. We're going to have a great set of keynotes and panel as well on Open RAN and the supply chain. I'm Kelsey Zeiser. I'm a senior editor at Light Reading. We're an online publication, B2B publication covering telecom news. So very excited to be here and to be your moderator this afternoon. So I'd like to welcome up to the stage Emmanuel Colta, senior analyst from GSMA.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Kelsey. My name is Emmanuel Colta. I'm a lead analyst at GSMA Intelligence. And we are the analyst and consulting arm for GSMA. So we provide syndicated research and consulting projects for mobile operators and vendors around the world, and also have a huge team of forecasters and data team, so provide a lot of data for the industry. So today's topic, and I believe we can just ask around, like, where is Open RAN these days, and where it's going to be, and why are we talking about this in 2023? And I would like to ask you to please raise your hand if you believe that Open RAN will be a significant part of wireless infrastructures in 5 years. I think it's close to 90%. So this is why I believe, and the question is why. And on the left side, you can see our data on cellular connections. So we expect that the number of connections are continue to increase. So as the data traffic in the middle. So you see it's almost exponentially increasing, and mostly 5G traffic by the end of 2025. And on the right side, you see the forecasted CapEx for mobile operators. So basically, mobile operators have to do more, transfer more data, serve more connections, and they expect that they're going to have a very flat CapEx curve. And the question is how? And despite it's 2023, I think there is still a lot of question and mixture about what is open, virtual, cloud, pooled, and distributed. And we believe that openness, and we shouldn't mix it, but openness is about opening up the vendor ecosystem and make sure that new operators can join in, and you can disaggregate your network and aggregate it back. So it's not the economy of scale. It's kind of virtualization when you can pull together different things. But openness just means that you're able to start mix and match different components. And here you see vendor market share. And in the last, I think, 7 years, since 2015, what I did here is basically just pull together the revenue for Huawei, Ericsson, Nokia, Alcatel-Lucent, and ZTE, and the others. And you can see that the market itself is very, very, very concentrated, and even got a bit concentrated. You can see the bump in 2018, 2019, after the political turmoils for the Chinese vendors, but you can still see that it's roughly 60% owned by the top 3 equipment vendor. So the market itself is very saturated, and you can see several markets where you're not able to use some vendors, so operators can see themselves almost in a duopoly market. And 20 years ago, I think there was Nokia, Siemens, Alcatel-Lucent, so the market was way more fragmented. But now we reached the point when operators need to do more. We are getting mature with 5G, and the number of solution providers are decreasing, and the market is concentrating further. So we asked several operators in the past years and have a lot of research interviews that why would they want to open up their network infrastructure, and what are their biggest issues. And we see that there is a huge financial pressure because you are obviously in a much better position to speak with your vendors if you have the chance to speak with more vendors, needless to say. And this is extremely important for 5G densification. On the other side, there is also an issue with sustainability of the supply chain. one thing that virtualization can help you to decrease the number of equipment and help you to be more space and energy efficient because you pool together resources. But on the other hand, with open interfaces, you can basically are in a better position and able to use new vendors and open up the market for innovation. So this means that if more companies can join into the market, that means that it can include more innovation as well. And the next slide, you can see a map of Open RAN deployments around the world. And in 2020, you could see a huge amount of optimism around Open RAN. I think when COVID started, even large traditional vendors started to speak about Open RAN, and they said they're going to be Open RAN compliant very soon. And in the Gartner hype cycle, that was kind of like the overwhelmed period from all over the world with huge announcements. By now, many of these announcements and many of these tests and launches became reality. And you see with this darker blue, those countries where you had proper commercial deployments, so the United States or Germany or India, Saudi Arabia or Japan, obviously, many markets in sub-Saharan Africa. And I would highlight also the light blue ones, which are the planned Open RAN deployments. And we count in our Open RAN tracker roughly 20 live commercial Open RAN deployment, and we expect that more than 70 will come in the following years. Many of them are very small, but many of them is pretty significant as well. And that was it from my end, and I wish you a very good panel discussion. And I believe that's such a great platform to let mobile operators and vendors to discuss the relevant questions. And for me, I would like to hand it over. So thank you so much for your time. Hope you find it useful. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Emmanuel. That was really interesting, and thanks for setting us up well for the rest of the discussion. I'd like to welcome next up Raman Attari, Regional VP of Middle East and Africa for Parallel Wireless.
Well, thank you very much, Kelsey, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Raman Attari, the Regional VP for Middle East and Africa for Parallel Wireless. And thank you to Emmanuel for starting his presentation, because I am actually going to talk about where we believe the state of Open RAN is today and what we can do to accelerate the deployment of Open RAN networks. So if I start off, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So I'll start off by talking about the original Open RAN vision and goals. And I'm sure you're all familiar with these, so I won't spend too much time dwelling over them. But then I'll go on to give you our perspective of where we think we are today against those original goals, and then offer some suggestions as to some initiatives that we believe will help accelerate deployment of Open RAN networks. And then I'll slightly change tack and talk about innovation or perhaps even disruption. We within Parallel Wireless believe that RAN centralization as a particular innovation can act as a catalyst to further accelerate the deployment of Open RAN networks. So again, you're all familiar with this slide. Open RAN started off by wanting to increase competition and bring an end to the oligopoly that's in place. Operators spend, as Emmanuel already mentioned, a significant amount of their annual CapEx budget on the radio access network, and they're always looking for ways to reduce their total cost of ownership. With further competition, you get more innovation, and operators have been suffering from this supplier lock-in where they have to buy soup to nuts from the same vendor. As the ecosystem expands, you get more supply diversity and resilience, and you get more investment in this space because you get more suppliers who are actually playing in this space. And last but not least, and perhaps most importantly, this is about the disaggregation of hardware and software. Operators want to be able to implement their Open RAN networks with the hardware of their choice. So what can we do to actually accelerate this deployment? Well, on the CapEx side, I think Emmanuel touched on this as well already. There have been already a number of Open RAN deployments. There are a number of announcements. The frequency of those announcements is actually increasing. There's no questioning that. However, compared to where we thought we would be 5 years ago, we've perhaps not moved at the pace that we thought we would be moving. And that has a direct impact on volume, and without the volume, we're not able to get the reduction in CapEx that we'd perhaps originally thought we could. In the area of innovation, the new players are constantly chasing features which has taken the incumbents years, if not decades, to develop. And this is taking some of the energy away from resources that can be directed at innovation as opposed to chasing features. And then on the area of supply lock-in, even though we are getting deployments, we are seeing a lot of deployments which are an alignment of the software and hardware, and the ecosystem is not growing as fast as it could, and we're not getting the supply diversity, which is essentially not giving us the disaggregation where we could have the any-to-any, which is the ultimate vision for Open RAN. So what can we do to accelerate this? Well, firstly, on the issue of features, there's no question that operators require a certain set of features to provide the level of performance that their customers require. Those are the features that are absolutely necessary. But we still see today RFIs and RFPs, which have features which are, some are nice to have, and some are quite frankly not even relevant anymore. And we need to see a more focused approach from operators so that we can tackle the big issues which are around network performance. The new vendors absolutely have to have compliance to the O-RAN standards, so that when the operators go ahead and deploy their networks, they have the ability to ensure that there is an interoperability between these networks. And obviously the O-RAN Alliance is doing a lot of work around this. There's been a lot of discussions recently about certification, so that when these deployments do take place, we do have that interoperability. In the area of CapEx and pricing and so on, we've seen the journey that the operators have been through. They started off by doing lab trials. They then moved on to doing proof of concepts. They moved on from proof of concepts to do field trials. We believe the time has now come where they can apportion parts of their network so that the Open RAN operators or vendors can go out there and deploy their networks in earnest, so we can start getting some of the volume that we're lacking at the moment. So let me now change tack, as I said, and talk about innovation, and in particular around centralization. This is an area that we within Parallel Wireless believe could act as a significant catalyst for the acceleration for the deployment of Open RAN networks. And I want to give you a couple of statistics to back up what I'm saying about intelligent RAN centralization. Based on some studies done even by the GSMA, more than 1% of the global energy consumption today is consumed by mobile operators. Now, through intelligent RAN centralization, we are able to, for example, go about spectrum optimization and do it at the cluster level as opposed to at the site level. We, through some of the work that we've done, do see significant reduction in power utilization, and given that 1% is being used by mobile operators, this is a large number. In the area of network utilization, we've, again, based on some of the work that we've seen done, again by the GSMA, we see utilization at 10 to 15%. Through centralization, we believe we can increase that utilization to perhaps more than 20%. Now just imagine when you have new customer demand, instead of having to constantly add capacity, if you're able to have a better usage of your network so you can not add that CapEx, that's going to be of significant benefit to the operators. And then in the areas of enhancements, upgrades, maintenance, these are done in a much more efficient manner, giving you much better network agility and elasticity. Now, as I said, we're very excited about this particular area. We have our experts at the show, and for those who are interested, we'd be very happy to take you through some of the specifics that I've not covered in this presentation. But in essence, what we're talking about is taking the processing away from the site into a centralized location. And you may have seen this slide before in different formats. We have done some tests with some tier 1 operators. We see that we can do this for distances of perhaps 40 kilometers or more. And by the application of the intelligent RAN centralization, we believe that this can act as the catalyst that I've been talking about. So to finish off, we talked about the initiatives that we believe are important. We talked about innovation, and we believe that it's a combination of the initiatives that I've discussed and perhaps even more. These are just some examples. By the combination of these two, we can accelerate the deployment of Open RAN network, giving rise to better supply chain diversity and resilience, which is what we're all hoping for. And with that, I'd like to thank you very much and hand you back over to Kelsey. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sadayuki Abeda, VP and Head of Open RAN Solutions for NTT DOCOMO.
Thank you very much for kind introduction. I'm Sadayuki Abeta of NTT DOCOMO. Today, I like to share our experience of Open RAN and the status of Open RAN. So, it works. Our network is already much been around from the beginning of the 5G. So, sorry. And when we discussed that, Open RAN, so there are some challenges I heard from many operators. The one is the system integration, because most of the operators do not have a capability to do integration by themselves, because it's new for the most of the operators. And it's also the interoperability test. And the cost structure, it's not so clear, since that if we need the integration, we need some additional cost maybe. Of course, we can reduce the cost by vendor competition. So, but total cost, not so sure it will be. And maybe the operation scheme has changed. So, I'd like to share our experience. Here is our network for both 4G and 5G. So 4G, we have already achieved multi-vendor network. We defined that the common front-fall interface. That at that time it's a CPRI. CPRI interface we defined by ourselves, and the vendor support that interface. So, but this is our specific interface. So we need to ask the vendor to support it. It's a costly. And so we defined that the open interface in all alliance. So all alliance defined that the 7.2x. And we use that interface for 5G. And between the 4G and 5G, we use X2 interface defined by 3GPP. But maybe you know well, 3GPP interface, sometimes some detail is not defined. So how to use the information element. So all alliance, what they do, they define that the profile to support the interoperability between the different vendors. With this 3GPP X2 interface and also the all alliance profile, we can achieve interoperability between the 4G and 5G. So we support ENDC, enhanced dual connectivity between 4G and 5G. We have 3 GNB vendors, so their implementation is different. But we have supported. And as for the front-forward interface, as mentioned, we have open interface 7.2x, and we use it. Thanks for the open interface, we selected new vendor after day one. So vendor A, vendor B, we selected from day one, but vendor E and the vendor F, we selected when we add new frequency band. So we did RFP and asked the vendor, and we selected the vendor based on the cost and performance. So open interface allowed to select the new vendors more easily without additional cost. Or of course, some integration cost is needed. And from our experience, people say the interoperability test takes a time. But yes, first test it back to 2019. It takes 6 months. It's very long. Because that everyone has different understanding of specifications. But second equipment, it takes 3 months, so we can do this half. And then recently, we take just 1 week to set up the L3 call. So we can say that 7.2x, especially category A, is already stable and already easy to select the new vendor. So here is a summary of the benefit we have had. One is that, as mentioned, we have already selected vendor after day one. And this also avoids the supply chain risk. So one example, a vendor, honestly, schedule has delayed, but we can keep that our deployment schedule because we use other vendors' equipment. And due to the semiconductor shortage, some vendor can't ship the RU, but we can use other vendor RU and keep our plan. Also, in our case, we use that frequency band N79. Even N79 is not common in the world at this time, but we can select the vendor who support N79. So we can select the solution in the world. So what really these two is different. It's quite complicated for me. So yeah. So what we are trying to do now is that so how we keep that flexibility and how we can reduce the cost. This is very important to the operators. So the VLAN case, we have a multiple vendor. That we need the integration. That we need additional cost. How we reduce the integration cost. So what we are doing, we are working with multiple ways. One is that we have the common lab, open share lab. Operator can use this lab remotely. So they don't need to have their own lab. They can just have a PC. So even here, I can connect to my network, test bed. So this space will be that test bed. So by sharing, we can significantly reduce cost and time. And second one is that sharing the integration or interoperability cost itself. So we have now working with a multiple vendor that include the hardware, accelerator, CAS, software. So still the operator have the choice, but we integrated and provide a solution. That means a pre-integrated solution. And the pre-integrated solution we will share. So then we will significantly reduce the integration cost. And the operator do not need to care the vendor's software or hardware updates. If the software vendor update cycle and cost cycle is different, we need many integration. That's very costly. But if we can align the timing, it will be simple and significantly reduce the cost. So we are working with partners to simplify the lifecycle management to reduce the cost. And also we are working with Vodafone to share the test process. Then both operator side and vendor side, we can easily to understand what we need to do. Then we can also reduce the cost. So this MWC, we announced that the Open RAN ecosystem experience, OREX. What is OREX? So OREX provides a solution, which I mentioned. So sharing is a key.
Okay, thanks so much, Sadayuki. That was really interesting. Our final keynote is Vivek Chadha. He's the SVP of Telco Cloud for Rakuten Symphony.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you, Chelsea. My name is Vivek. I work for a company called Rakuten Symphony. I'm assuming most people in the room have heard about it, and it's got a little bit to do with ORAN. I'm going to start with something that came to my mind as I was hearing my fellow panelists talk about some of the innovations their organizations are doing and the perspective that they bring to the advancement and the future of ORAN. And a quote came to my mind from a gentleman called Mahatma Gandhi. And he once said, "Be the change you want to see in the world." And it's ironic, this had nothing to do with ORAN or technology. But for those of you who know about Rakuten, we actually did that. We believed, and some of you who know our leadership, Miki Mikitani, Tariq Amin, they believe so fiercely that the way forward for mobile networks is fiercely connected to the concept of ORAN, that rather than try and show the concept to the world and then find a way to get it done, they said, we'll just do it for ourselves first. Because seeing is believing. So we're very proud that we have had a role to play in helping move this forward. But the discussion I want to focus on today, and by the way, some of what I'm sharing has actually been covered quite eloquently, firstly by Emmanuel and then with Rami, etc. So it won't be necessarily profoundly different, but perhaps a slightly different perspective on some of the aspects. I'm going to give this nice thing a try. Oh, lucky me. So the transformation on Open RAN is now being underpinned by 4 main pillars from an execution standpoint. There's a lot of other things that have to come in to make it work and be not just a technology flashpoint that fades away into something else, because there's cost economics, there's suppliers, there's ecosystems involved. But these 4 pillars, we believe, are key to making the execution, the reality of ORAN a possibility. Open interfaces, hardware and software disaggregation, cloud native, and I'll touch about that a little more specifically, because it is a fundamental change in how things have to be done in the telco world, in the mobile world going forward. And automation and orchestration, which I think is an obvious outcome because of the disaggregated nature of the network. The biggest change that is needed is to accept and appreciate that you are entering the same change that happened when software became a given way of life for speed, agility, in-flight changes, scalability. And the IT world and the network worlds haven't played so well in the past because they had very different drivers. They had very different forces pulling them to deliver different outcomes to the businesses. But technology does find a way to converge. And I think we've seen that over the last essentially 8 to 10 years, especially with cloud native, et cetera, Open RAN, open interfaces, eCPRI, you have now this inflection point where you're actually able to say, I can now build networks in a way that has never been possible in the last 30 years. A lot of you in this audience have been involved in going from one G to the other. Massive RFPs, a lot of procurement-driven outcomes, a lot of faith placed in contractual commitments and hoping that the technology will deliver, but one thing never changed, regardless of which technology vendor you chose. Old boxes had to be taken out and new boxes had to be put in, and a fairly interesting and involved systems integration effort, regardless of their technology choice. No more. So if we think about what actually are these 4 pillars and why they profoundly impact how Open RAN adoption is going to accelerate, let's talk about the gain first, and let's talk about what are some of the benefits that are directly influenced by each of those 4 pillars, right? Hardware standardization. We were having a chat about how this MWC is so much better and looks like the old MWC. And one of my experiences from last year is having to wear a mask. And that was uncomfortable. And networks still had to be built, and base stations had to be upgraded, and fiber cuts had to be dealt with, and the world went on. But there are people, including my colleagues from NTT, who actually spoke about how silicon shortage, supply chain, it all got a big shock. Manuel started with a very interesting chart. And it shows the concentration of the legacy equipment provider base. God forbid we have another COVID-like event, we're still not ready. We will still struggle, but we've learned something. Japan is a country made up of a very varied geography. It's got many islands. You have an obligation as a service provider to provide coverage. Those of you know a little bit about Rakuten Mobile, the 4th operator. Not only has 98% coverage, they launched a few years ago, they are 4 years ahead of schedule despite COVID. And this wouldn't have been possible without being able to disaggregate the hardware and the software and increase the diversity of the supplier base. And the disaggregation is not just about the choice of more suppliers, it is now COTS hardware, it's x86. Somebody was joking with me yesterday, one of the operators saying, thank you for allowing us to go and just buy something off of Amazon and shove it into a data center. And it's a fact. If you wanted to, you could do it, because it's a commodity hardware now. The same thing's happening with the software side of the world as well. And the site design is being simplified. I think we've already seen a pictorial representation of that earlier. So that's one pillar, right? So this disaggregation is a direct influencer of how your supply chain can now be more resilient, which also means your ability to deliver things faster is going up. Also helps on the procurement side of things, obviously, because now you can buy from anybody you want. Open interfaces set the stage for mobile as a software. For those of you who had the chance to join our leadership team yesterday in the partner program, we launched our vision of mobile as a software. Rakuten Symphony did its first Mobile World Congress the year before. So it's been 1 year. We're relatively young in terms of coming together and actually being able to offer this to the entire world. And a fundamental part of being able to deliver mobile as a software is open interfaces. Open interfaces allow you to not just have different vendors come in and plug in and provide you capabilities, The one thing that I personally find the most exciting in this is you now allow possibilities for young, innovative companies, for challengers to come and say, my cost of trying to do something with you as an operator, my barrier has been lowered. Because if it's open interfaces, and if I align with that philosophy, and we build something together, may the best product win. And that is good for us, it's good for our customers. That, to me, is one of the biggest wins of open interfaces. It's not just the building of things, it's allowing these new innovations, these people with new ideas to come and then play in an ecosystem that has been very expensive, very complicated, very hard to be part of historically. The software-first mindset is from everything. It's from the design, the build, the deploy, and the run point of view. You can and have to do it in a way that has been common practice in the IT world for many, many years. And we've shown that it is possible. And last but not the least, open interfaces also are needed to have a robust ecosystem of tool sets for orchestration and command and control infrastructure. The one fundamental horizontal part that also allows all of this to work and work at scale is also the cloud-native architecture. When you move to a microservices and a container-based architecture, and you have all these cool vendors giving you cores and RANs and components for your enterprise business, and you want to be able to use an app store-like experience to play with them, none of that's going to be scalable, sustainable, or possible if you don't have a robust, a battle-proven, industrial-grade O-cloud architecture. I actually read a report on my way here. I think it's by STL. It was released, I don't know, a few days ago. Apparently, we have the world's largest telco edge cloud deployment. The Rakuten SIM cloud deployments across the world, they're the world's largest. So the proof is already there. This has happened. And again, the cloud-native platform is what made possible for us to deliver the network rollout for Rakuten Mobile ahead of schedule, despite all the impacts of COVID in a geography as complex as Japan. Last but not the least, when you are enabling all of this openness and you are able to embrace the world that's giving you all this innovation, you've got to make it easy not just to have them play in your sandbox, but you want to introduce them into the network. We are now at a point where we've made it extremely simple, and we believe we've almost come to the point where we think we have done for the cloud-native world, for the mobile network world, what something like iOS did or Apple iPhone did for the consumer iPhone. For those of you who have the opportunity, we're in Hall 2, come have a look. We'll actually show you how you now have an app store for an entire set of network functions, one-click deployment, which takes me to the next point, which is you've deployed all of this, and now you want to configure, run, maintain, and keep the lights on. There was a peak rollout period where we were doing something like 300 sites a week, and the average time for the engineers to go do their stuff for each job was less than an hour. These are new sites. They're all radiating now. There's 350 sites radiating in Japan. And the key thing that took that 40 minutes to an hour 10 was getting into a van, taking a bare metal chassis, getting access to the data center, putting it in, powering it on. That's it. It had nothing on it. Because the moment it was powered on, the orchestration platform Rakuten Symphony built figures out what that piece of equipment is based on the serial number, CPU ID, etc. It knows exactly what it is meant to be. Is this a CU? Is this a DU? Is it a different kind of security classification? The entire orchestration, including starting from vendor security certificates, operating system, BIOS, the application, all the networking, all the fronthaul backhaul is done zero touch remotely. This is mobile as a software. And on that note, I'd like to thank you all. And I'm going to hand it back to Chelsea now. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Vivek. I appreciate that. I'd love to welcome up our panelists. We're going to be talking about supply chain resiliency and Open RAN. So come on up. Yeah, so thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Would love to just do a quick round of introductions. If you'd like to start.
Sure. Hi, I'm Prakash Seva, and I lead technology and architecture at Radisys. I'm based out of Western US, Portland, Oregon.
I guess people have got to know me already. I'm Ramin Attari, Regional VP for Palo Wireless, and I'm based out of Dubai.
Hi, I'm Doug Pulley. I'm Chief Solutions Architect at Picocom, and I'm based in Bristol.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Paz Zorandi. I'm a Chief Strategy Officer for 4iG Group, focusing on 5G and mobile. And 4iG is a Hungary-based IT system integrator company who is entering the telco space. So we acquired mobile operators in Hungary, Montenegro, and Albania recently.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you all again for joining us. And Ramin, you actually touched on this in your keynote. Our first question is about, has Open RAN, has the hype matched what's actually going on? What are things looking like in terms of Open RAN momentum? Is it what we expected?
Well, I guess I covered it to some extent in my presentation.
Yeah.
So there was the initial expectation of and the vision of the goals of Open RAN and where we are today, and I obviously offered some potential initiatives that could provide that acceleration. I think the key thing is for us to grow the ecosystem, because one of the challenges that we see the operators face is when we talk to operators, and in my region, particularly Middle East and Africa, we change the conversation with our customers where we explain to them that this is not you have to buy everything from us. This is a full ecosystem. You can buy the various elements from us, but you can also go out there and look at the different suppliers. So I think when you change the conversation with your customers and you offer a different perspective, and they understand that they're not stuck with a piece of hardware that they bought because they bought it from vendor X, then those initiatives can have an impact on their buying cycles and their decision making, and I've seen that in action with some of the customers that I've been speaking to.
Right, yeah, that's really interesting. Doug or Prakash, do you have anything to add? Has Open RAN momentum matched our expectations so far?
I kind of agree with the panelists. I think the nice part has been Open RAN or ORAN has opened up the possibilities of what is possible with the combination of cloud technologies and open interfaces, and it's absolutely needed for the space. But I think the reality of deployment has been a little bit less compared to the overall view of where we think ORAN will go. But the beauty is this is still a young area, this is still a growing area, and we'll talk more about the supply chain. As those challenges get overcome, we see significant growth in this area. And part of this is to get the economics right. The balance between having enough suppliers and having the diversity, but not so much fragmentation. So getting that balance right is super important. We see this moving forward in 23 and 24 and future.
Yeah, that's a great point. That is a hard balance to reach. Doug or Pal, do you have anything to add, or any examples of Open RAN deployments that have been going well that you'd like to discuss?
Well, I think in terms of expectations, to your point, I think it's about having realistic expectations. I've worked in infrastructure in cellular from 1G through 2G through to now 5G, and I think I think one learns that there's a lot of complexity to manage here. There's a lot of work to do, and stuff just takes time. From the point of view of early launches with general purpose silicon, that's our perspective as a baseband SoC supplier, to the point where to get optimized silicon for hit the right cost points and power points to make it practical to roll out, that silicon design cycle just takes time. So the state of play is no surprise.
Yeah, we have to show a little patience then. Pal, anything to add?
From our perspective, we are 4iG is an IT system integrator company originally, the biggest one in Hungary, and we just the last 2 years entered the telco space. So we just acquired these mobile operators in 3 countries. We inherited the supplier relationships, and we are actually very happy with the existing, very well performing traditional vendors. But we definitely see this big trend of the IT and the telco worlds converging. And we believe that the Open RAN is, in the radio space, it's kind of the symbol or the manifestation of this trend, which is a strong trend. And for us, it's actually a great timing, because we just completed our biggest acquisition. It was the Vodafone Hungary. So we have now finally the engineering talent and people who can join these activities, and we are not late. So we believe that it is exactly the right time for us to join the movement of the Open RAN movement. We had many discussions here in Barcelona with all potential partners in the ecosystem. It's going to happen sooner or later. Yeah, basically, we are not that concerned about the time. We also talk to many European peer operators who are not our competitors and who share their experiences. We definitely see the momentum building up. So.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the talent aspect. I think that's really interesting as well. Is there a need to upskill the industry in preparation for Open RAN as well? Is that a challenge that service providers are facing?
I think that is an important aspect of this, that upskilling. But really, that upskilling has to be tied to an even more fundamental issue of networks being built and being able to react well to services. Ultimately, it's the services that drive the networks and the technology. So what we really look at is that skill set should reflect that, right? We talked about disaggregation, we talked about cloud technologies, we talked about a range of silicon types. All of that brings in that dynamism, and that dynamism has to be supported by those skill sets. Mm-hmm. And for us, as Radisys, one of the key parts, I think other speakers also mentioned this, is the importance of system integration. So the skill sets are not just in the development, but also in the ability to integrate these pieces together. So one of the things we do is bring different kinds of silicon together, and to be able to layer our software on top, so that we can afford or supply an experience that is centric towards what is required by the services that ride on top of that. So to be able to match that and have the skills to be able to do that, then that is obviously the winning combination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, going back to kind of the title of our panel about the supply chain resiliency, how is the supply chain impacting growth in Open RAN, both from a technological and economic standpoint? Vivek touched on it a little bit about how COVID maybe potentially threw a wrench in things. So what are your thoughts? Raman, maybe you want to kick us off on that supply chain aspect.
During the pandemic, there was an absolute supply chain crunch. There's no question, and it wasn't just about supply chain. It was also about, trying to get container ships. The whole journey of getting the equipment to the customers was extremely more complicated. But the world has changed a little bit since then. Obviously, we've had the war in Ukraine. We've had the macroeconomic situation change. We don't believe that the supply chain is nearly as bad as it was perhaps in 2020, 2021. And we see that in even the cost of shipping that has changed to reflect that. But at least from where I'm sitting, I've seen an improvement. I don't know whether in the different parts of the ecosystem perhaps there's a different
Yeah, I would love to hear from you, Doug and Pal.
So I guess we're at the beginning almost of the supply chain for certainly for RAN items. And as a silicon provider, we get to see people's early developments, them taking these boxes through to production, to lab trials, and then to field trials. I mean, if you go to our stand in Hall 5, shameless plug, we have a wall with 8 or 9 of our customers' products that are out there on a wall there. You can go and have a look at. I think we see things in a pretty healthy state. It's just that we get the chance to see it first.
Right. Yeah, that's good to hear. Paul, anything?
Well, I mean, in terms of Open RAN supply chain problems, we just joining this area, so no experience there. But of course, as an IT system integrator, we had our own issues with supply chain delays and and delivering to our customers our IT solutions and boxes. So.
Do you all have any thoughts on how standards bodies or government policies are supporting Open RAN and also perhaps navigating some of those supply chain issues? Prakash, do you have any thoughts?
Absolutely. I think government has an important role to play to encourage innovation, to encourage that openness. So one of the things I can, from the US side, is the NTIA has a $1.5 billion wireless innovation fund. Actually, Radisys participated last year in the NTIA Wireless Challenge, and we won the prize for the DU and for Software Bomb.
Congratulations.
Right? It was fantastic. Yeah. But that is the kind of innovation, what we think of as encouraging innovation, encouraging that openness. That's just an example. There are others in the UK. There are others globally. So part of what we see that encouragement coming is to be able to embrace a wide collection of suppliers, a wide collection of vendors in an environment where these things can be tried out. For example, ORAN Plugfest, right? We are part of that. So all of that absolutely helps make sure the ecosystem moves forward in this journey.
Yeah, makes sense. Doug or Powell?
I think one very good change recently has been the move for the ORAN Alliance to submit its specifications through to the to ETSI, the European Telecommunications Standards Institute, as being a very long-standing and formal standards body. I think that shows that Open RAN has definitely come of age. And that those specs are now available to the public under the normal way of receiving specifications in this industry. So I think that's a very good step.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really speaks to that need for collaboration across a lot of different industry bodies and vendors. And Powell, did you have anything you'd like to add?
So as a new operator group, so we have made many huge acquisitions, so our balance sheets are pretty stretched. So meaning that our budget for this kind of future-oriented activities like Open RAN, they are quite tight. Therefore, we are talking to, for example, to NTIA, U.S. State Department. We are trying to understand what potential financial support or financing would be available to help us push this because what we see ourselves as a potential partner for American vendors and other vendors in this part of the region where we operate to push this initiative further in a mutually beneficial way. So definitely we are considering potential external financial support.
Yeah, that makes sense. Raman, are there ways that regulators can better support service providers in being more ambitious in deploying Open RAN networks? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think they can offer stronger encouragement. I mean, we've seen, as I said in my presentation, we've been at it for a number of years now. Mm-hmm. And the number of POCs and field trials and lab trials that the operators have done, I mean, they are enormous. So I think we are at that inflection point where we need that stronger encouragement from regulators to essentially ask the operators to carve out parts of their network so the Open RAN operators can come out there and prove in earnest what they have. There's no point in just doing small POCs, small lab trials. We've got to get this thing to volume. And I think one of my colleagues in one of the presentations said if you don't go out there and try it, you'll never find out. So yes, there are very specific performance KPIs that absolutely have to be met for customers, but you're never going to get anything perfect. So I think this is the right time for stronger, probably the word is stronger encouragement globally by regulators for operators, or even perhaps incentives for them to go about and implement Open RAN in portions of their network at least.
What might some of those incentives look like?
The incentives, I think they could be incentives or they could be disincentives.
Okay, yeah.
It's a carrot and stick at the end of the day. So what we want to see, well, the industry will benefit from more openness. I think everybody here agrees with that. So we've got to find a way that we get the operators to go down this journey. And I mean, I'm not on the regulation side, I'm not going to sort of preach the practices, but I think it could be some on the positives and perhaps some on the negative. If you don't have X% of your network, you know, with Open RAN by a certain date, then you could potentially get penalized. I'm just thinking out loud here, but you know, those are potentially some of the ways that we can look at this.
Yeah. Prakash?
Yeah,
your
I
thoughts?
think just tied to that is there could be one of the ways you think of this is ultimately get the economics right. Costs have to come down, and one way to do that is, can you encourage more sharing of resources at different levels, right? You could share at the spectrum level. US does it with CBRS. You could share at the network level. You could share at the infrastructure level. So it's almost like some of that obviously the operators have to be will have to voluntarily do that. But obviously there's a role of the regulator to make that easier or to move in that direction. Because to be able to get the diversity, one is to get the cost down and the diversity of suppliers, then you want to attract new entrants, right? And one of the ways to do that is to be able to say, hey, share these capabilities, make sure that you are able to provide the different levels of sharing, right? And so that attracts different models, different capabilities for the same network, right, or the same collection of networks.
Yeah. And it definitely seems like there's kind of a need for a culture shift within the industry too, to kind of adopt that more open point of view.
Absolutely, that open point of view coming with allowing multiple silicon and people at different levels to play seamlessly, right? That openness is what is super important, right? One example, I'm just going to, for shared RAN, for neutral host infrastructure, we just announced something with Denser, and it's there in our booth. Come over to booth in Hall 5. And one of the things there is we supply some parts of it, but other parts come from other vendors, right? And this is a shared neutral host infrastructure that other people can participate. Ultimately, it comes down to cost, right? To be able to reduce the cost and the resiliency that comes with that, right? By able to attract more suppliers.
Yeah. Anything else to add, Doug or Pal, on that subject? Yeah, we covered a lot there. And what are some other ways that the industry can perhaps think outside the box in identifying other financial support opportunities, and what other key partnerships are necessary to focus on for Open RAN testing and pilots? Pal or Raman, do you have any thoughts?
Well, at least on the commercial deployment side, and a lot of the work that we do is, for example, in rural Africa. And you know, these are the most difficult parts. These are the unconnected parts of the world where you have the lowest ARPU. And so we've seen the partnership that takes place between systems integrators and perhaps operators, so that they can go about some sort of revenue sharing model, so that the whole equation starts coming together. Because when you want to go from where you are today to perhaps covering a new village, you have to look at the demographics, you have to look at the spending ability of the people there, the penetration of handsets, and if you put this thing in the wrong place, your whole financial model falls apart. So it's a very it's a difficult process, and you know, we work with partners who go about doing this, but I think if you get it right, everybody benefits. And I remember one of our partners telling us that the look of joy on this lady's face when they were able to make a phone call out of a village, it was just priceless. And those are some of the benefits that we don't talk about. We're actually connecting the unconnected by coming up with business models which are not your usual business model of the supplier sell to the operator, they build the network, but you have some sort of SI model in between.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks in the U.S. too experienced that during the pandemic. I, heard examples of parents driving their kids to the local McDonald's just so they could have connectivity.
Yeah.
So that's a really interesting example that you shared. Any other thoughts on partnerships or new, financial opportunities for Open RAN?
One thing, at least since you mentioned the US, we should really think deeply about CBRS and how to use that spectrum to serve communities that are less well connected. And there are some of our partners who are doing that, but that might include both private and public partnerships where GA or PAL licenses are set aside and in certain areas so that there can be a set of vendors and a set of what I really think of as operators who can serve these areas, but at a cost points that is appropriate for potentially appropriate for those areas and to provide that coverage. So CBRS might be another way to look at this to connect the unconnected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts on how we can better serve historically underserved areas, both with 5G and Open RAN? Pal, what do you think?
So it's a hot topic now on this show as well, the non-terrestrial networks, and terrestrial, non-terrestrial interworking, and the LEO satellites, which is a very interesting topic for us for IG, because we also have a strategic ownership in an Israeli satellite company, Spacecom. So we have GEO satellites, not exactly LEO, but Spacecom is very well connected and working together with the whole ecosystem. And we started conceptualizing that Open RAN could emerge as an important element in this terrestrial, non-terrestrial, seamless interworking, because conceptually you need to interwork between base stations that are part of the terrestrial network, and most likely the vendor, the supplier who is feeding the signal from the sky, it's a different vendor. So this could be an interesting trend that maybe accelerates a little bit stimulates new ideas in this space and stimulates a little bit the Open RAN adoption. I don't know. Definitely want to better understand this. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely a lot of new exciting opportunities in non-terrestrial networks as well. How can those and also terrestrial networks interoperate in Open RAN deployments?
Well, I think when we go to the rural areas, you're faced with a new reality. There's no grid power. You've got to look at, what type of technology you're providing. Is it 2G, 3G? Is it 2G, 4G? And then how do you do the backhaul? And your opportunity for backhaul is either to use fiber, which is mostly non-existent in those areas. So it then comes down to microwave, or then potentially VSAT. But then you've got to look at the cost element, because you've got to power this thing up with solar power, and then you've got to find a way of doing the backhaul, and elements like power play a very important role as opposed to your recurring cost of using a satellite. So the dynamic changes from a remote village to a dense urban area where you don't have any of these issues. You've got fiber connectivity, the power's there, and I talked about RAN centralization. That's a perfect case for RAN centralization. But as you move out to what we call rural, then ultra rural, that dynamic completely changes, and you've got to make use of some of these technologies such as VSAT and microwave and others to get your connectivity to the Open RAN BTS.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we have just a few minutes left, so I wanted to give you all an opportunity just to kind of close out. Anything else that you're looking forward to in terms of Open RAN and the supply chain, helping those underserved networks, key partnerships. Any closing thoughts on the many things that we've discussed this afternoon? Prakash, why don't we start with you?
Sure. We think to get supply chains resilient and ensuring that supply chains are strong requires diversity. And what we believe is having a range of silicon and layers well supported by a system integrator, potentially also building products, is key, because that's what provides that to the ecosystem. And having that, doing that at a cost point that makes this affordable is also important. But again, this is the balance, the economic balance between having enough suppliers, but not so fragmented that you still get economics of scale while having the resiliency in the supply chain system. So we have a number of demos describing this in our Hall 5 booth. So folks are happy to we're happy to host you and describe those.
Yeah, that's a great point about the variety of options. You don't want to get into that paralysis by analysis situation.
You got to have that balance, because if it's too fragmented, then nobody gets enough share, right? So what is that, and having that, but you need system integrators who can pull in based on application, based on your capabilities. How do you get that capability, that silicon in, and build systems, obviously, for the different things that we have talked about.
Thanks. Raman, any closing thoughts?
No, I think you're absolutely right. We need to have that right balance, and we don't want to be in a position that we've got Open RAN, but we've got one vendor's software only working with another vendor's hardware, because that's not open anymore. It's maybe use the ECPRI standard, but it's still, we've got to get to this one-to-one to one-to-N or one-to-many, but without diluting it too much, that we don't use that, the incentive for further investment, and that getting that balance right is absolutely key, as you just said.
It's hard, but the industry has to move in that direction. Mm-hmm. Right, so I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the way we'd see it really is we're now moving to an era of Open RAN where there is, and it's not just us, there are optimized devices now. That means there are no excuses for not being able to build boxes that are effective from a CapEx and OpEx standpoint, so that the box builders have places to go to get that stuff that's compliant and ready to go. I think the other thing that was quite interesting, and a philosophical point, but on the NTN and the connecting the unconnected is I guess very timely as we sort of set requirements moving towards 6G in the future, that may be going 10x faster all the time for a small privileged bunch of users is not necessarily the right way for us to go as an industry, but more to make sure that we do serve everybody with a really good grade of service, rather than maybe an unnecessarily fast grade of service for just a privileged few. Yeah,
that digital equity is really important. Pal, close this out.
It's very simple. So for Edge, we are the new kids on the block in this space. We really believe in the IT telco convergence. We believe in this Open RAN trend and momentum. So we are very excited to start really cooperating with the many players of this emerging ecosystem. So very excited.
Yeah. Well, before I let you all go, I did want to remind everyone that we have networking and drinks in Hall 4 at the Industry City, so hope to see you all there. Thanks to our panelists. We covered a lot in a short amount of time. It was so great hearing from each of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.